Okay, this question is, as a female athlete, how much should this person adapt their training with their menstrual cycle? Again, this really depends. And again, the short answer is to test it to see. What this question is referring to is our understanding that later in the luteal phase of a woman's cycle, kind of usually the 5 to 7 days before she starts her period, there are some hormonal changes that can impact training, sometimes quite dramatically. And this varies widely from woman to woman, for each woman from cycle to cycle, and across a woman's kind of naturally cycling years, or premenopausal years. So the science does tell us that we will have a harder time with maximal efforts, primarily like neuromuscular sprinting efforts, also anaerobic efforts. But some women find it difficult to train at other intensities as well. And it is very common that RPE is higher for really almost any given intensity. So, some women kind of deal with that better than others. Some women really struggle with that, from like having it be really demoralizing, that can kind of set off a cascade of like a really poor emotional mental response to training, which is never helpful. So you're going to have to ask yourself kind of how you manage that when the RPE is really high for the output. Are you able to kind of step back and be like, well, I can dig deeper and be okay with this, given the knowledge that I know where I am in my cycle and why this may be happening? Or do you find that more challenging? It's also very common that some women have a lot of difficulty training with some of these symptoms that I just mentioned. Only they experience these symptoms more around ovulation, which would be like in the middle of their cycle as opposed to during the luteal phase. So sometimes we might modify training in these ways around ovulation as opposed to the luteal phase. So one thing that I do see being very effective and probably underutilized is that, during the luteal phase of a woman's cycle, we have a harder time drawing on glycogen stored in the muscle, meaning we can't rely on fuel that is already on board. We need to supplement fueling. We need exogenous carbohydrate. We have a higher need for exogenous carbohydrate during the luteal phase. What does that mean? It means you have to eat more carbohydrate during and before your workouts than you do otherwise. A lot of women have a hard time with this. It can be especially difficult, during the luteal phase. If you're already feeling kind of bloated and heavy, it's even harder to then get yourself to take on more fuel. But I do see this as being quite effective in mitigating some of these symptoms. Women also during the luteal phase typically have an increase of about 1 degree in core body temp. So that means you're going to have a higher need for hydration. It also means you may have a lower tolerance for heat stress. So again, you need to be a little bit more on top of pre and in-workout hydration. Plain water probably won't cut it. You need to use some kind of electrolyte drink mix, for sodium balance in the cells. And finally, it is common for, the thing that kicks off most of these symptoms is just this latent level of increased inflammation. And that latent inflammation can also impact a woman's resistance to injury during this phase. So you are more likely to kick off an overuse injury in the 5 to 7 days before you start your cycle. So you do need to be a little bit more kind of keyed into little aches and pains that may come up, because something that might normally, just be something you kind of barely notice during your workout could cascade into a larger overuse injury during this time. There's also research that concussions can have a larger impact, or, can be like a higher grade concussion than at another point in your cycle. So being aware of some of those things, given the timing of your cycle, can be helpful in terms of staying healthy long term. So that's a lot of information, but all of that is to say it depends. And you simply have to listen to your body and understand that something that works during one cycle may not work during the next. Your friend may do one thing and you may need to do something different. So, all we can do is kind of understand what the science tells us about what's going on, what that typically means for most women, but ultimately the burden is on you to see how you're feeling, listen to your body, and make those decisions for yourself. And also to give yourself permission and agency over your own body, because ultimately no coach, mentor, parent, anyone else is going to know better than you how you are feeling. And so, as an athlete, it's up to you to listen to your body, learn to recognize those cues, and, have the agency to kind of advocate for yourself in those situations. So, not a straightforward answer, but hopefully that gives you a bit of direction.